All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, and I don't know, I assume Brad will show up at some point in here, and I haven't heard anything from Will, so we'll just get started on things. And first, before we go any further, so we have a new member of the planning board. So Aaron, introduce yourself, give us the 2-second bio, and then we'll all do the same.
My name is Erin Downing. I'm a resident of Sladeville Springs. I lived here for a few years and just heard about the opening on the review board and talked to the town board, and they just thought I'd be a good fit for the planning board. Don't have a lot of background in government, but I just want to help out the town, and like I love living here. Just want to be a
And what is your background in terms of work or education or whatever?
I have a degree in marine biology, totally random, but I ended up in medical laboratory science, which is what I do now. I give it.
Awesome, great. Let's go on this way, Barb.
I'm Barb News. I'm a retired professor from Cornell in environmental policy. I was just in Aruba last week, experiencing marine biology. So we have something in common here. I've been on the planning board for a few years, and before that on the zoning commission for the town and the land use and economic development task force or something like that for the town with Michelle, who is up there.
And so I'm Bill Podelka, chairing the board, and have been for 4 years, and I want to remember, I think about 7 or 8 now. So, my background is as a physicist, but I came at this, I was one of the ones involved in the fracking issue, and so that's what got me involved in local issues and local politics. And so I wound up on the planning board. I've been doing this work ever since, and served with Barb on the zoning commission and various other things since that time.
I'm Adam Hilker. I've lived on, or really close, grew up in Ithaca, right down the road, lived in town of Caroline since 2006. And I own a local business, Ideal Self Storage, that I bought from my grandparents a few years ago. And I've just been on this board for maybe a year.
About a year, a little roughly. Yep. Okay, and Michelle, go ahead. Anybody, right? Okay, you guys met. That's okay. She knows who you are.
Can I just say one thing? This is a little bit part of my report, actually, but we didn't actually seat Erin yet. We decided not to seat her until after the first of the year. So she's technically hasn't been seated. So
good of minor practical import, but good to know.
I know, I'm just maybe for voting or something. It's important, but
as you know, we don't really vote very often, so
right.
And this is be a discussion of things.
Just being detail oriented. Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate that, and as Erin has been forewarned, she's jumping in like on a speeding ship, trying to get her, so it's going to be confusing for a meeting or two, because we are well on the way.
I was talking to Mark today, and he said he hoped she'd be able to come tonight. So
I know, Erin, express your willingness to. That's great. I'm glad you can. Okay, so we have 2 young men here from Ithaca High School who are attending as part of their classroom duties to see local government in action. So, all right, everyone look sharp.
Are both of you town of Caroline residents? Is that why you chose us?
Yeah, I'm close. All right. Where do you live?
I live right next to Celebration right there.
Okay.
Right on top of that hill.
Right.
I live in Alice Hollow.
Okay, cool. Yeah, close enough. You're just over the line, I promise. I wasn't driving. Okay, yeah, close enough. All right, great. So I don't see anybody else here for privilege of the floor, and I don't see up. Okay, we do have Brad on Zoom. Hopefully he's gonna. I did just admit him. I didn't notice he came up before. So that's working. There it is. Okay, there's Brad. Hi, Brad. Sorry, I don't know how long you were sitting there. I didn't notice you at first.
That's okay. I get that a lot.
All right. What you missed is, so a new member has been almost appointed to the planning board. Erin is here. We all introduce ourselves. So just give the 2-sentence rundown, tell her your name and your background.
So I'm Brad Yenser. I am a full-time physician, and I also am a full-time farmer. I own Thirsty Fruit Farm right down the road. I have no excuse for not being there right now in person, since I'm so close, other than I literally just got done shoving food in my mouth and was like, oh crap, I need to log on my meeting. Sorry.
All right, okay, great. All right, so there's no privilege of the floor then, and so we'll move on to the minutes from last meeting. Any additions, corrections, changes, anything like that? None of you signed off, said they were fine?
Good.
All right, I will mark those as approved, get them posted. So then that brings us to town board report. Michelle, what do you have to tell us besides the fact that Aaron is almost here?
Well, we were discussing, let's see, Mark wanted me to say that he's gonna finish doing work on the subdivision law, so that that will be up for discussion. And then also we're hoping that maybe in February to change the zoning law to reflect the work you did on the mobile home law. And everybody, thanks you very much for working on that.
Okay,
So,
great.
so does that mean we would have something to do with the subdivision law?
Sounds like, I mean, I assume Mark would then pass it, so I'm a little out of the loop on it, because we did work on that already. You
The
know,
subdivision law, yeah.
a year ago, in terms of what got, big debate about whether every subdivision got reviewed or not and all that kind of thing. That
Well,
all went through, so what's going on now?
I think he's just gonna take your comments in consideration and see if there are any little tweaks he has to make.
Okay,
So I
Right.
mentioned to him that I think one person said, does the planning board have to review it? But I think you had review. I mean, I know you came and gave comments on it, so I
Yeah.
mentioned that.
okay, I do not believe there's any requirement in the town. I mean, we're an advisory board to the town board, so
Yeah.
you seek our advice when you want it. I will insert it when I think you need it, but I don't think you have to listen to us.
No, so I'm just, but I think Mark maybe wants to, take what comments you made in consideration and maybe do a few tweaks. But
Okay.
so that's coming up, and the more important thing is the changes to the zoning law. And actually, there is something. I guess I have to be a little vague about this because I stopped in to double check with him. I guess we're thinking of changing the name of the planning board to
Okay.
but we're not sure to what. I think other towns, actually what the planning board does, they call the review board, and the review board is called something else. So there, in the coming year, there may be some name changes.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, I just did this to the two observers here.
Yeah.
Always find myself having to explain because we don't do what a normal planning board does.
Right.
So
Right.
it becomes an oddball. I mean, actually, often the same board does both jobs. I don't know how they possibly can, because we're
Yeah.
both full.
Anyway, so that's going to be under review, and there'll probably be some changes.
Okay,
So a change.
do you think February for zoning?
Yep.
Possible.
Yeah.
Possible name change.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I think that's about it.
okay. Great. All right, so then we'll move on to consideration of the solar law. Is there someone, either maybe Brad or Adam, who's going to jot down, a few notes?
I can do it.
Okay, all right, Adam's gonna take that on. And again, as you know, focusing on anything we decide, I'll try to keep track as well, just to make sure. All right, so, and I don't know if I have this display. Oh, maybe I do. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can pop up the document I sent you guys with, my version of Barb's changes, I guess so, that way. Yep, there it is. Okay, so. I'm gonna try to share my screen. Yes. All right, it get bigger up there? I can't tell. I got bigger on my screen here.
No, it didn't.
No, it didn't. Oh, that's frustrating. I'll try it one more time. That is interesting. All right, I'm gonna try to stop the share and restart the share. Maybe it's just,
It looked fine on our end, on this end.
okay, great. It just, okay, maybe it's just here in the studio, in the town hall, it's not working great.
Okay, if you maximize this window, it might make it a little bit bigger.
Okay, let me try that. Back to the yet. All right. So I will. No, you guys probably still can't read that.
Really?
I mean, yeah, so Brad, you can read that, right? But I don't think anybody else here can. Only.
Yeah, I mean, it
it's
looks
just
normal
fine.
to
It's
to
probably,
me.
we're looking all the way across the friggin' room at this little thing up there, so, and yeah, Zoom has changed itself, but I don't know how to get this to do something better. So, all right, we're gonna just muddle through as best we can. Let me just, try to make this. Okay. Yeah, it stays remarkably fixed. Okay. Well, I don't know if you guys want to bring it up, or you're looking at it on your phone. You can bring it up. You've got it there. Okay, so you've got it. All right. So everyone else has it anyway. So this will work. Okay. So Barb took we discussed at the last meeting and dove back into the changes I had slapped down and made them much better. And that's what we're gonna look at now. The first one in yellow, so one of the steps that you made was to define something called agricultural production, because we got twisted around about how, a whole armful of words describe what kind of stuff could take place. So you added a definition of agricultural production. That's the first thing in yellow up there. And then the only change I did is then in an agrivoltaic facility, I just said, okay, we'll just refer to that as a chunk. No need to put any of those terms in again. So we have that. So an agrivoltaic facility would have photovoltaic stuff, and also it's doing the simultaneous production of solar energy and agricultural production. Agricultural production is defined as given in the first paragraph there, which, marketable plant crops, marketable animal products, which can be fiber, meat, whatever. So any discussion of doing it that way? Pretty cool.
That looks good.
It's fine by me.
Yeah, just a comment, just for context here, that the term marketable doesn't require that they're actually sold. It's just that, they're of quantity and quality that they could be sold. So, this, I think a question came up, what if we have a subsistence farmer who wants to do this, and they're not really selling their goods? That's fine, but what they were growing, it's not, what this suggests is it's not like somebody, with 2 broccoli plants or something, it's, marketable.
Okay. Cool.
Brad, you were going to say something?
Well, I guess that my question is, I guess is by saying, I mean, I have no problems with the definitions. I think the definitions of marketable products is fine, but in terms of what our goal is our goal to support farmers or just homesteaders, right? And I know New York State has, drawn a line in the sand, as well as a lot of the feds, is that they want to support commercial farmers, commercial farming, You know, because these are guys who are supplying food to others, not just themselves. Um, and so again, that's, you know, when we're doing this, if we're talking agrivoltaics and we're trying to support and promote farming, the question just comes in, you know, as you said, is it just any crops grown for any purpose whatsoever, or is it farming? Is it actual farming where someone's selling product, uh, you know, for the greater good, for as you know, a commercial business? And I don't, you know, I have, I don't know if I have super strong feelings on this. I certainly have biased feelings because, you know, being a farmer myself, and friends that are farmers and wanting to support them, but it's just a question for the group.
No, I think it's a good question, a good point. And so I think we can chat about it a bit. And so I'll hold my fire for a few minutes. If anybody else wants to chime in on, so, you know, and we'll hit this again when it comes to, we sort of define farmer later, right? And it was an open question about whether it's the New York State definition of $10,000, you know, gross or not. And that was, but we kicked that to the Ag Committee because they have adopted a somewhat broader definition in their, you know, Ag document. So having said that, is anybody else who wants to comment at this time? Because again, it's a philosophical point of what is the goal?
I feel like finding someone who wants to be a homesteader on a solar field, solar site probably would be very few and far between. So wouldn't that just go down to the review board if they decide to waive anything? They could take that, could they, even from this law?
So they're allowed to, yeah, so and that came up in Guy's comments, well, because you know, that certainly, I know in terms of the site plan review, they are basically de facto empowered to waive provisions. And I'm assuming that applies to site plan like things in the solar law, even though it's not part of the site plan law. That's a question I have for him based on the road. So I don't know the answer to that question.
I'm not, I don't think it's important to specify that homesteaders would be outlawed from doing this. I agree with Adam that I don't think that's going to be an issue for the type of facilities we're talking about. And I mean, if it does become an issue, then I think we could talk, you know, whatever board is empowered, talk about it then. But I would prefer as inclusive a definition of agricultural production as we can to include both plant and animal products.
And again, I think that the road, we'll hit the road when we get to what's a farmer. And again, that is, so I think we'll leave that for that part, Brad. I guess my own feeling, having been around in this a few different times over the years with the Caroline community, is, you know, the reason the Ag Committee came out the way they did, I think there's definitely some feeling that the New York State definition is too onerous for the sort of smaller farm operations that tend to be in Caroline. But they are still farmers doing marketable products. So I think that speaks to the farmer definition, not to the marketable products definition. So I guess I'll agree with, if it becomes a problem, then the review board or whatever is in charge at the time can probably try to address it. If someone is somehow claimed to be marketable products, but they're not really.
Well, and that was just, I guess that'll come down to the definition of farmer then, you know, if, because there's a difference between a homesteader and a farmer. You know, one person has a garden to feed themselves, another person has a garden to feed others.
Yeah.
And themselves.
Yeah.
And themselves. Sure.
And so I think so we can save and leave it to that part. And, you know, on the one hand, just having the land in some sort of agricultural production to help hold it, maybe for some future farmer, might be beneficial. But I agree that in some extent we are trying to support farming in Caroline. That's called out in the comprehensive plan. So we'll have to have some threshold, perhaps, but we'll see. Okay, and then so those two are approved as written. Last time, we talked about this qualifying agrivoltaic facility. And, I think I may or may not have renumbered 8.6C and D to refer to later sections that we're about to talk about. But the point would be that it would refer to what the appropriate sections that say, here's what you have to, be to be a qualifying one. So I think we implicitly had agreed on doing something like that last time, so I'm not gonna put it up again. Did we talk about farm plan last time? You remember?
I don't.
You may have added something.
I don't remember, but at least there is the change that it refers to agricultural production now, because that
Yeah.
is the definition of that.
So, I mean, the main things that are a bit different now that we're adding is there used to be a requirement for a farm plan. And also now there's a bit more detail definitely on the vegetative maintenance, plan. And so, again, any changes in wording on the definition of farm plan here? Okay, all right, we'll keep that. All right, so then the next one, host community agreements. So, this comes out of the legal advice we got from the town lawyer.
Whose name is Guy?
Whose name is-
reference?
Guy Crowe, yeah, Guy. Exactly. And to be honest, so I threw this in since our last meeting, but to be honest, host community agreement, I think, is kind of a thing. It acts as if we are defining it here. I think he was using that language because it is sort of an accepted term that is sort of and there's probably developing case law around it or whatever. But I couldn't find like a reference on the web to say, host community agreement as defined in such and such, whatever. But this is what it's described as being, so I threw that language in here. If he didn't like it, he'll change it.
Okay.
But I thought that was interesting. I guess we'll get to that when we get to that section, that he actually was all for separating out from the pilot, the host community agreement. So hey, that's all it is. The host community agreement is a binding contract between, the people trying to do the thing, the applicant and or operator in the town of Caroline. And it specifies what kind of benefits the town will get directly from the project. In terms of either, build a playground, pay us $1,000 a year, whatever it might be. And again, whoever takes over the facility, that's the end, and their successors part. So any discussion of the host community agreement definition?
And just a point for Aaron, Bill referred to the pilot, PILOT, that's payment in lieu of taxes.
Sounds good too.
All right, that. And then, so we had added the vegetative management plan last time, but now there's going to be a written plan that talks about how the vegetation can be managed around the solar panels. Okay, so then we get to dive into content. So scroll this down, perhaps. All right, and we may need to circle back. I'm focusing on section 8. So again, Aaron, I sent you this, but I don't know how much time you really got in. So the solar law has 3 sort of general categories: small, medium, large. Medium and large are fairly similar. Large, of course, larger, but fewer requirements than medium. So in terms of the most of the agrivoltaic stuff, that's going to apply to these larger things, take more than 2.5 acres or whatever. But we probably have to circle back to section 7, which is the medium ones, and see what needs to get dropped down to there. But in the section applying to the largest facilities that take up more than 2.5 acres, there is divided into multiple parts, and one is what you have to do when you are applying. So there's application requirements. So the addition there, XI, is for a vegetation management plan. And I think, again, I may have truncated, moved up a little bit, but it's mostly your wording, I believe. But I take fault for any errors in the transliteration. But basically, they have to submit a plan, and it shall describe the following, and that's the ABCD. So, and this is again probably going out of discussions with someone who does this sort of stuff, saying, "Hey, I do grazing and I just want people, you know, they don't always think about doing it, so make them think about it. So they have to evaluate something besides mowing or taking care of the vegetation. They have to say, okay, here's how we're going to manage the vegetation. This is our chosen method, and here's why we're doing that. If they're going to do grazing, then what animals you're going to do, and there may be some places the animals can't reach. How are you going to handle that? And if instead you're doing mowing entirely, how often you know you're going to be doing that, and when are you going to be doing that? And that and some conditions that feed into when we get to the other section. Barb delved into at a, you know, brought by a town member. I thought it was a good idea. If we're going to mow, could we do it in a way that least hurts wildlife? If I believe it now. And so the reason for having them specify that, you know, what time of season, what time of day, how fast, how high, et cetera, you're going to use a flush bar is to sort of get them to think about those sort of things. And then in the later section, you know, they're going to have to tell us what they're doing for those things. So. Okay, so again, any discussion about the vegetation management plan requirement, changes in wording?
There's just a couple edits.
Okay.
If you want to, I don't know if you just want to hand mark those.
Yeah.
The second line where it says, it's the plan vegetation management activities and explains, explain should have an S.
Thank you.
And then, in the next sentence, there's two ins, change in vegetation management.
Okay, great, thank you. Brad, you taking a look at that?
Yeah, so one of my things I would just comment on is, you know, it just seems to be giving a dichotomous, you either are mowing or you're grazing with sheep. And if you're not grazing with sheep, you need to explain your rationale. Well, what about other agricultural activities, such as vegetable or fruit production that might not be necessarily mowing or grazing? You know, as I guess part of the management plan.
So I hear you.
Or would that just be included in the evaluation of alternatives to mowing?
Exactly. Because I got to that and I had the same thought process you're going through. But the point is, you know, the reason it doesn't say, it used to say sort of, if you're not, you know, it really only said mowing or grazing in the previous iteration of this law.
Right.
I'm thinking alternatives to mowing means everything. And we aren't asking for details if they're cropping, because that actually is the farm plan.
Right.
Sure.
And so we only call out grazing and mowing, but I hear you that it sort of almost makes it sound like those are the two choices.
Yeah.
But alternatives, plural to mowing, should theoretically cover using crops.
Sure.
So I don't know if we need to say anything more clearly here about that, or if we're okay with this as written, with that understanding.
I mean, it's still managing vegetation one way or another.
Right, so I mean, it seems to be farming is included under an alternative to mowing. And the only reason it wasn't specifically called out is that there wasn't anything to ask them to put here. I guess well,
maybe just insert the word evaluation of agricultural alternatives, maybe to mowing, or agricultural activities that are alternatives to mowing. Would that, or is that just getting too nitpicky?
I can go either way. Thoughts? Maybe agricultural is too, I mean, indeed, the other two things we're talking about, both agricultural, maybe that is too limiting. Maybe they want to grow moss.
But is that
Yes,
an
I mean,
agricultural activity?
It seems like we had a discussion, kind of related to this, that, one could do grazing, but if there's not a market for the meat and there's not a market for the wool and there's not a market for the breeders, you're really just doing grazing as your vegetation management, and then you're not
You're
marketing
not doing
that animal.
agriculture,
Basically,
right,
you're
yeah.
just killing the animal and, whatever. So it's not really, it doesn't fit the definition of agricultural production necessarily. So I think if we're gonna do that, then maybe we need to have an item E, which would be if agricultural production is the chosen method, then the vegetation management plan becomes the farm plan or something.
Yeah, I was debating something like that, I
Yeah.
got stuck right there in
Yeah.
that thought process, that's exactly where I
Yeah.
got stuck.
Yeah. So I don't have good wording off the top of my head, but I think that's kind of what you're getting at, Brad.
Yes.
And I'm cool with that, because again, I understand how just calling out the two makes it look like a dichotomy, so I'm good with that, and we'll try to come up with a appropriate E sentence. Because part of the problem is if you use a word like agricultural production, then, but the grazing already is that possibly.
Right.
So you might say if crops are cropping, maybe we have to sort of say, I don't know. So I don't have a good word there. Or Brad, how would you like to write point E?
That sounds great. I'll type something up here and I'll get it to you in a second.
All right, no worries. You just have to get it to me, this week. Not much gonna happen next week or the week after, that's for sure, so. All right. So, adopted with the addition of an E, that is gonna be draft written by Brad. That is going to refer in some way to ag or crops or something as the vegetation management scheme. And that points towards the fact that they have to do a farm plan, which is coming up in what we're about to talk about. All right. Next section is in 8.4 of the law. There was already a call out, again, I think I explained to the folks in the committee last time that language came from a bill, a sample law given by NYSERDA. So it wasn't my writing. I don't mean to I'm not trying to push blame off, but basically it was way too sophisticated for it to be something I would have written. I did not know about all these things. So it just said that there should be a benefit to the town for these large facilities, and they do require it. So again, Baron, mostly for your benefit, once you get really big, up to about 25 megawatts, the local community is not allowed to regulate the facility. That's done by the state level. In between 20 and 25 megawatts, the developer can choose to go under local regulation or under state regulation. So anything we say is only go up to about 20 megawatts or maybe 25. At any rate, for those very large ones, the state does require there be some sort of community benefit payment of some kind. But typically, the way communities deal with this is do something called a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes. So instead of having the property assessed for the value that the stuff adds, that can be discouraging because it can be too much money. And so often, if you want to encourage an activity, communities will reach a different agreement with the developer to say, we'll cut you a break on taxes if you build a facility here. So it's very common for apartments, for industry, and for solar facilities and other facilities. And there was a pilot just negotiated. What we all learned is that negotiation is not done by the town. There is actually a group that does it for all of Tompkins County. And so in that sense, there's some loss of control. And that meant we had no way of affecting what that negotiation was. If we wanted to make negotiation favor an agrivoltaic facility, we had no way to do that.
Who does?
So there's something called the industrial. So in general, the group is called Industrial Development Agencies, IDAs. They're established by the state. You may have heard of them, and they're the Tompkins County Industrial Development Agency, TCIDA, and they are overseen by another mouthful acronym. But at any rate, they do the negotiations, and in some senses, that's good because that means they've done a bunch of these. They have some experience. In some ways, it's bad because they, again, they're Tompkins County, they aren't Caroline, or they aren't Dryden, they aren't Groton. They don't have that local sensibility necessarily. They have their rules by how they negotiate solar pilot payments, and we had no way of affecting those rules. They do give a break that they've recently proposed for agrivoltaic facilities, so that's good. but it's not our brick. So I wanted to establish something the town had control over, and so I asked the town lawyer, basically, can we do that in addition to other stuff? And he said, sure. He thinks it's a good idea. So that leads us to the new wording of, rather than just one lump thing talking about pilots and other payments to the town, we separate it out. And it says point blank that the permittee shall negotiate a host community agreement with the town of Caroline. And that language, host community agreement, is what the lawyer advised. And then I'd say, and if in addition, you can do a pilot or something else. That's fine. And final background, as we all saw, I think I reported last time, the local assessor thinks that going forward, there'll be many fewer pilots because the state has a formula by which they want solar things evaluated in terms of value for property tax purposes.
The solar.
Solar calculator, which was ruled unconstitutional a year or so ago, but they're going to fix that issue. And then once it happens, the break is substantial enough that his view is that most developers will just say, okay, I'll pay property taxes. I don't negotiate anything different. I'm already giving you a good deal. So when that happens, this language still gives us a little something to play with. So, any objections? Seem okay?
Good.
So we'll keep that. All right, so then getting more into, again, the meat of things is the design requirements. Okay, so what I proposed from what you wrote is that, again, the current law lumps together revegetation and vegetation maintenance in one paragraph, because at the time we didn't have a lot, as much experience as we all now have in what goes on. And so I split that because we now want to talk about how the vegetation is maintained, not just, there's enough to say, it might as well be its own section. So I essentially kept the revegetation language that was there. And so bring that up to the top. So it talks about, that basically there should be vegetative cover. And again, the idea here is against erosion issues, right? So you have vegetative cover. So it should be vegetated, but we don't want it with invasive stuff. So again, at the time, we're still not requiring them to do any particular thing, but we are encouraging non-invasive native ground covers, et cetera. Pollinator friendly, and then there was a particular call out against something because there was a fescue species with endosymbionts should not be used as they are toxic to sheep. Okay, so again, not within my wheelhouse, but we had someone who worked on this last time, did the law, and he talked to someone who was doing it, and that was their recommendation: stay away from that. Let's see. Yeah. So 2 points. So when he was here, Caleb actually didn't necessarily like specifying native. Because there's non-native things that it'd be great for his sheep to graze on. But I didn't put that in. I'm raising again in case people want to put that in. I'm still more likely to lean towards non-invasives for this purpose. That's just me. So that's point one to talk about. Point two is I have not done it yet, but and I think we'll get to it again if we don't do it now. But as was pointed out by Guillermo, the consultant we talked about, I mentioned with you, if people are growing crops, you can't require things to be vegetated at all times. So what we need to add is some sort of escape clause saying for a qualifying agrivoltaic facility, we waive X, Y, or Z. So I just want to make sure we agree with the latter point before drafting this language. So first, on native species recommendation, again, we don't insist. It just says, what do they say? Yeah, encourages the use of non-invasive native ground cover. Any discussion of that? Barb's fine. You're
Fine.
okay. Brad, seem okay to you? Brad?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. I was shaking my head, but
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, you're tiny on my little, and then you're not there, and I have to, I'm not skilled enough to remember to look at that little image of Brad.
Sorry. Yes.
All right. Okay, and I believe based on previous discussions, we're all okay with saying if you're doing crops, we understand you can't keep it vegetated at all times. Anyone want to throw out a little bit of wording? As you all know, I hate to do actual drafting in committee, but what roughly should it say?
So what, the escape clause?
Yeah, the escape clause should be, yeah.
Oh, I guess I would suggest in there that, something about this, this section does not pertain to qualifying agrivoltaic facilities. But instead they should be submitting the farm plan.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I would just say something to, yeah, exactly, Barb. This section doesn't apply to those qualifying facilities with a farm plan.
Okay.
Those will be covered in the farm plan.
Okay, sounds good to me. All right, and then the split out part in terms of vegetation maintenance is what then incorporates a bunch of what Barb had brought in terms of mowing for wildlife. And this part has two sections, one of which is design standards. And in land use speak, standards are things that have to happen, and guidelines are things that we are telling you we like to have happen but don't have to happen. So design standards for vegetation management would be one, that mowing, if conducted, shall be done in the early spring, meaning March or earlier, or late fall, November or later, to be before or after key vegetation blooming and animal nesting periods. And no mow zone shall be established along field edges, fence lines, and wetland borders at a width deemed appropriate by the review board for the particular facility. So as you all recall from the email that I sent and got back from Guy, much to my surprise, he said that would be totally fine, actually best to do in this law. Actually, I think he sort of really meant in site plan, but again, this sort of has site plan pieces to it. And as I told committee, and Barb well knows, we were sort of taught during zoning that, well, if you want to say something about when something happens, how the business is done as opposed to where it's done, that really takes a special use permit. And Guy said, nah, not really. It's actually better to do it in a place where the reviewer can waive it if it's deemed too onerous or something like that. And that gets you out of legal problems of stealing away rights.
Well, I would definitely flag number one as being too onerous. From the standpoint of, you know, I live in Slaterville Springs. If I take my tractor out in March or earlier and it doesn't have tracks on the machine, you're not getting that machine back out until November. It's gonna sink. You're not gonna mow. The reality is you're not gonna mow your land in March, and then the solar panel company, unless you're growing a low growing vegetation that doesn't grow, like tall fescue or something, you have to get out there and mow sometime in summer to get that grass down to a reasonable height. So I feel like that one is a little tricky from the standpoint of the reality of getting equipment in there to mow during those times to really have any impact whatsoever on the vegetation blocking the sunshine from the panels.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
So you don't think that there's a type of vegetation that could be mowed in November, mow once a year in November?
Yeah, I think most of the weeds and grass that will grow that someone's going to put in there. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are low growing grasses, and I plant, tall creeping red fescue because it doesn't grow very tall or in my orchards. But a lot of the guys, if they're using anything else or other species of grasses and weeds and natives and whatnot, a lot of those plants are going to grow very quickly, very tall, come May, June, all of a sudden they're going to shoot up, 4 or 5 feet tall, potentially, depending on the area and the species of vegetation. Um, and that's the time you're going to need to at least once, not necessarily all summer long, every week mowing it, keeping it a golf course, but um, you're going to probably have to get in once during that growth season. And to say to someone, well, you need to come in March when you can't get in there because it's so wet, or in November when it's kind of irrelevant at that point, everything's dead. Are you really I just don't see the solar company being happy with that statement. You're basically saying, well, then you can't mow because no one's going to mow in March or earlier, from a reality standpoint. And then November or later, just nothing's growing, right? And it's either not growing or too wet.
So these were the recommendations that came out of numerous articles written about solar facilities being kind to wildlife, and saying that this can be done, and it wasn't just like from a particular geographic area. So as I read this, it seemed like there was a lot of good reasoning and evidence that this is workable. So that's what my dilemma is.
And I mean, and so what I can say, I got trails and fields that I mow. And, again, for me, the ideal mowing time to keep things at bay is, I go out late May, early June, because that's when the first, then they're maybe a foot tall. And then I don't have to do it till, the field trails are great to walk in until, and then the end of the year, you're just whacking it down to keep woody growth at bay. You could do it once a year in the fall. It's actually a lot of my trails, I used to do that, but then they're kind of long in the summer. So I hear you about it, Brad, and you're right. It's pretty hard to get out in March.
And it really depends on the soil type and where it's at. I mean,
but so if it pushes people to grazing, I don't exactly have a problem with that. And I guess if you were could waive it for a particular facility, conceivably, I think you raise good points about the practicality in Caroline conditions.
Yeah, our soil types here are such that, again, I have tracks on all my vehicles for a reason, and I even got my tracked vehicles stuck, and you can get them stuck a lot of times a year, including the middle of summer. And to take a heavy mower out, in March is just. I don't see any farmer or person who has a machine wanting to or being willing to do that. I just, from a practical logistical standpoint, in this area of New York, I just don't see that happening from that time standpoint. I don't disagree with, how can we reduce mowing and promote wildlife? I'm totally on board with it. It's just, balancing the reality of you have to please the solar company to some degree, right? They don't want their solar panels shaded, so you have to keep vegetation low. And if mowing's part of that plan, but then you put such a onerous on mowing that they really, in all practical purposes, can't get out to mow, it's just, I don't know. I think that places an undue burden on them. I think maybe finding some other wording where we can just like limit it to, twice a year mowing or something, but not necessarily specifying the time. Because the weather, like this last spring, we had rain all the way up until June 1. It was a sloppy mess. And then all of a sudden it was a drought and not a drop of rain happened until end of September. So I think, there's also seasonality and weather differences. So I think placing onerous that has to be March or earlier is very, I think it makes me uncomfortable. I wouldn't want to be a farmer or someone, agreeing to those rules.
Well, remember, farmers wouldn't be doing this. Farmers would be cropping. This is vegetation management not for a farm plan.
Well, anybody on a machine, anybody getting out into fields mowing, they're not gonna, want to do it. in that is what I'm saying. I think in this area of the world, I think my concern would be the impracticality in them sinking their mowers or machines into the earth. And that's even if anything's growing.
Yeah, sure. All right, so I'm gonna suggest, I mean, I think I know what to say, but why don't we talk to Caleb about it? See if he has any brilliant ideas, because he's doing both mowing and grazing, and see how he feels about that and how he would best compromise between saving wildlife and mowing guidelines. And I don't know if you can, those definitely apply to the Northeast, you know. I mean, I can tell you, we clean out our bird boxes in March, April, and I can be slogging through snow, or I can be out there in a 70-degree sunny day, but.
Right. And so I think it's difficult to say, hey, you have to have it done before March. Well, things fluctuate year to year and with the weather. And
They can have the end of March. Maybe we need to be a little more generous in the early, I don't know. So yeah, let's see if we can figure anything else out, because I hear you, but I hear you. And I think that this is a problem. Again, I literally do face it our property that I'm trying to clear areas, and I don't want to do it during nesting season, and it's usually too cold or wet in the spring. And so I have this small window in the fall, and it is frustrating. But on the other hand, that's what we do. It's not gonna go mow down a bunch of bird nests, so.
Well, what if it was revised to say, mowing if conducted shall be done in spring or fall to occur before or after key vegetation blooming and animal nesting periods?
Get rid of the March or earlier.
Get rid of
early and late, and get rid of months mentioned. So shall be done in spring or fall to occur before or after key vegetation blooming and animal nesting periods.
yeah, and I think that's so much more reasonable. I think because then that gives the flexibility of when are things blooming and when can they get out, and still maintains, I think, the goal, right, of protecting the wildlife without specifying a date.
Right.
I mean, the issue we have, of course, is who's gonna be out there checking? I mean, in reality, we aren't policing this, but at least we can put the idea out there, and
Right.
potentially could police it, right? But okay, I'm good with that. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. We'll do that then. All right. So then we get down to the design guidelines. All right, design guidelines, and explicitly says, they're desired, not required. And this is where some of the other stuff comes in, that basically it says vegetation maintenance by grazing or crop production wherever possible. So we're definitely putting those two out there as the preferred things, but not required. The herbicide thing came down from the old language in the law that basically we understand that, again, we don't want to use herbicides, but occasionally they have to be used for particularly nasty invasive species. So, for frequency, it says mowing should be minimized no more than twice annually, and then preferably annually or biennially. So again, it depends on what is being grown. For that, again, that can push them to revegetate with something that allows that kind of a mowing schedule. And then finally, the whole slew of here's how you might do your mowing. So it talks about the mosaics. It talks about starting at the center and moving out with a high blade during the day, because that's better, because all nocturnal wildlife is, hard to get out of the way, and a flush bar, and do slowly. So all those guidance things are in there. Everybody have a discussion of the guidelines? All right. I assume they're adopted as written. Okay. All right. So then, having done that, we get to defining and requirements on what it is that's a qualifying agrivoltaic facility for Caroline. And so the benefit is that you can have a reduced host payment agreement, or even one that's zero, and that you get some relief from some of the, like we said, the vegetation cover, et cetera. And then, what you have to do for the design, basically you have to have a farm plan and a vegetation management plan, and update them whenever you change what you're doing. And the farm plan talks about what it is you're doing agriculturally, and in how the system design enables that. So, I think that's good. I think the one issue where you run into is, 5 years later, 10 years later, you want to do a different kind of farming. Well, I guess you have to live with the design that they came up with at the time. That's how it works.
Quick question,
Yeah.
does the farm plan not include the vegetation management plan, or would that be a separate thing?
I'm thinking of it, well, it's separate in part because maybe you're only farming part of it.
Right.
So the farming plan describes, I guess, the parts you're actively cultivating for crops. And I'm sure outside that there'll be area that you're not doing that too. You still have to maintain the vegetation.
Right.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, so what the farm plan should have is, how much buffer area there is around infrastructure, because again, you need room to get mowers and tractors in and out and everything. What is gone from some of the stuff that was there before is any specific distances. I think that was sort of the sense of the committee, that we shouldn't be too specific because you never know what new equipment might come down the way or whatever. So I'm willing to go with that. I kind of liked at least some sort of minimum standard, but I fully understand that again, so much can change in 5 or 10 or 20 years. So we'll just say, count on the review board at the time it's doing its job. Tell that to your husband, which may include hiring an expert who can say, yeah, what they're proposing is unrealistic, or yeah, that sounds good. So hopefully they're going to do that. Okay, so the width of buffer areas around infrastructure, how much room there's at the end of the rows to turn around, get a tractor around, any internal buffer areas around fencing, et cetera. What vegetation's grown in those buffer areas, how high the panels are off the ground, the lower panel edge height, how you're going to get vehicles in and out, and how much is devoted to pollinator habitat, wildlife habitat, as opposed to actual crops. And we set a cap on that at 20%. How much of the solar facility is actually in ag production? And since you say that you can have overlapping because you're doing both cropping and grazing, conceivably you could have 100% of the area, but that you have to do at least 70% of the facility must be devoted to production to be this qualifying category, you get benefits. If there's crop production, what crops? And what your plans are for the crops and processing them. And if it's animal production, what are the plans, what are the type of animals and shelter, housing, processing, et cetera. So all stuff that came out of various things we've looked at and what you looked at.
Could they, a developer and farm plan or the farmer, could they basically put it so broad that they could say like any crop, any animal, just so they cover themselves for the duration of?
That would be up to the review board at the end to say, hey, if they're happy, I guess, but presumably not, but they could.
Yeah, I mean, 9 and 10 there, so if crop production is included as description of plans for the type of crops and their processing, for animal production, type of animals and their feeding, shelter and processing. I mean, I would think the review board would raise their eyebrows if they said, we're gonna plant any type of crop under the sun and process it how it's supposed to be processed. I mean, that's
the next 25 years, we may decide to do chickens and turkeys and pigs and at different times. And this is the way we would do it if we did it.
And
That's up to the review board,
Right,
yeah.
and you know, yeah, that kind of thing's not that unreasonable. I mean, if they're gonna say, yeah, don't worry, we're gonna have some kind of crop there, that shouldn't fly.
Well,
They're gonna say,
that
we
that
might do
brings up
soybeans or corn, alternating, and then that's fine too, probably. Go ahead, Brad, sorry.
that brings up an excellent question though, Caleb, is uh
Yeah.
was talking about stuff with um his sheep production, but what if it changes production? So what if it's still farm production? Is there a requirement that so they'll specify, let's say, in there what crops they're going to grow, what animals they're going to have, but what if they want to change it down the road? Do they need to submit a new farm plan?
Yeah, that's what we said. We said if there's any significant change, that's why it says significant. You know, that lets like, oh, so you do 10% less area, fine. You know, if you didn't, things change, something changed, fine. But yeah, if you're going to change in a significant way, the crop, the animal, the mix, or something, yeah, you have to submit a new plan.
Great.
All right. Any other discussion of that? All right, so we'll that. And then is the guidelines. So this is where some of the more aspirational stuff comes in. Because we understand that, you know, nice to have them think about it, who knows? But so these guidelines say that would, you know, it'd be nice to have both crop production and animal production. You don't have to do it, but if you can do both, great. Think about using panels spread further apart, so there's more flexibility in terms of the crops that can be grown. You know, maybe you're willing to provide water, to dig a pond or dig a well. That makes it easier to have animals. So that's a benefit that farmers can get from a solar thing going in. Or use some of these novel racking systems where maybe you can tip the panels all the way up, and that makes it really easy to get tractors in and out. You know, or just use vertical panels. You get less solar, but you have much more area for farming. And lastly, you know, some of these really highfalutin, partially transparent panels that, you know, let more sunlight through the crops, that kind of stuff. So those are things just to get from thinking, but we obviously aren't going to require some of the more fanciful stuff. Discussion of any of those. All right, good. Take that. And then the last one, which we sort of had this discussion before, we'll talk about it now. And I think basically we've agreed to kick it to the ag committee, is a specification that the ag activity be conducted by a person or company meeting the New York State definition of farmer, mainly meaning total gross income of $10,000 at least.
And that should be annual gross.
Yeah, okay,
Total annual.
all right, I'll add that. And again, this whole thing may change.
Right.
So, and Brad, I think, you know, it's fine, but I think your preference would be to have it that way or not?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are sticking to some sort of standard that's supporting farmers, not just people who are just growing backyard gardens, right? And it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm selling, you know, $50 worth of my excess zucchini because I happen to have excess zucchini, but they're not really farming. And you know, I know this was a big debate out in Oregon when I lived out there, and we're, you know, the farming community, you know, and same thing. There was then standards set by the state for what qualified as a farmer to at least get tax breaks, right? So people could still call themselves farmers, but it came down to the state is supporting these farmers through tax breaks and tax subsidies. And this here is yet another example of some sort of, you know, local tax break, local tax subsidy. So my thoughts are just to stick with the New York State definition of that, since that's what this is. It's a formal government tax subsidy. It should meet, you know, a formal government, you know, definition, you know, to help be consistent. You know, I know the definition of farmer in the agricultural, you know, plan, as it were, from the ag committee is more broad and inclusive. And yes, we want to include more people, and yes, we want to support the community and all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, I think there should be some sort of standard.
Well, I'm gonna agree, but I don't know if this is the right standard, so I'm gonna, again, you'll have your chance to argue it with the, your case with the ag committee, because you're there, you're part of that, right?
Right.
So
And so that
I
was
think
my final
I'd like to get
question to
their
you guys
feedback.
is what besides this, what was it, were there other specific questions you wanted me to take to the ag committee? Because when I in my early discussions with them about, the agrivoltaics was just that they wanted to know from you guys what specific questions did you have that you wanted, to ask them?
We, one second, I got a question, but we had some, and I think we've sort of passed by most of them. So this may be the only one now, but I have a question from the attendee, so go ahead.
I just had like a question about that.
Yeah.
What's like the recommended amount of acreage you need farming? So, like what considers like farmland or like just regular? Just,
Okay. I do not know if there's an answer to that question. So from the solar energy end, it sort of depends what you're trying to do. But if you're trying to power a house, you can do it with not that many panels. But if you're trying to provide power commercially, then it's an economic of scale problem. And so it just depends on. So there is a facility going in the southeast corner of Caroline. And I think they're taking up about 20-ish acres. I remember, I might be confusing megawatts now with acres. I can't remember how many acres it is. Tens of acres. Whereas the big facility going up, they take up hundreds of acres. Yeah. But that has to do more with the economics of solar power. There is a 2-acre array that's providing power to a company downtown in town. So it can work depending. So that's the hand wave I can do for you. I think there's no single answer to make variables.
Can I ask a question for Brad? That's something perhaps you can run by the ag committee, in terms of their goals in defining an agrivoltaic facility. One of the things we specifically say in this is that pollinator/wildlife habitat, but key here is pollinator habitat, may not exceed 20% for a qualifying facility. And is that problematic for a farmer who would be, a honeybee production farmer? And is that something that the ag committee, would want to encourage, that in fact, maybe an agrivoltaic facility would be all pollinator habitat because it's going to be a honey producing facility? And for me, it would be useful to know from the ag committee if that's, an idea of agriculture, or if they really are thinking more of, more traditional, I guess, crop, grains, so on, and animal production.
Sure.
Does that make sense, Brad?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Is basically, do they see that it's problematic that we limit the area in terms of you're talking specifically under the design guidelines, right?
Yeah.
That the percentage of solar facility area devoted to pollinator wildlife may not exceed 20% of the qualifying agrivoltaic facility area. And is that a problem for them from the standpoint of agriculture? If someone's a bee farmer and has bees, I mean, I guess I'll have to kick it to them because I'm not a bee farmer. I have bees on my property with
My grandfather and
Alex.
uncle were.
Yeah, so that's right. Yeah, that's right. I remember that. So Adam, do you have something you
I
want to
would say that most likely, unless it's a gigantic area and I don't think just planting, pollinating wild things would probably do much for bees.
Okay.
They would need something like, for instance, my grandfather would put his bees near a buckwheat field if he got permission.
Yeah.
And that would give you buckwheat honey,
Right.
but that's just a flash in the pan. Same thing with
Right.
goldenrod or
Right.
locust or basswood. Those are just blooms, but they're not, you have to move the bees, or the bees can travel, obviously, but I feel like
So you wouldn't have a goldenrod field at your solar facility and do goldenrod honey?
well, then it would only, I mean, that would only be one time during the whole season that it would give honey.
Right, but that's what I mean, you know, from the perspective of the Ag Committee, would that be the type of agriculture that they find,
Oh,
appropriate for?
but the bees wouldn't be there most of the time, is that still, you mean, okay,
Correct, yeah, but the product, they are producing an agricultural product,
yes,
and that's goldenrod honey.
So Brett, I would actually suggest, now that we have it all written out, that you bring the entire qualifying ag facility section to them, 8.6 as written here in the notes.
Yeah.
And have them take a look at it and give feedback.
Sure. Sure.
But
With those two specific questions though, the 20% and then D, the last one, qualifying farmer,
but all along, the whole thing will give them context, but also there may be other things in there that they suggest. And
Right.
all the
right. It always helps to have specific questions for them, because sometimes whenever you're asking people for input, it can be like pulling teeth. If you want actual answers, sometimes it's best to ask direct questions.
Understood.
So that's all.
That's probably why we now have, this written set of stuff. I've been talking about this for months now. All right. So that handles our proposed changes. Guillermo had various points that he raised. So I'm going to stop this particular share. And so I want to move on for, so it is currently about 8:30, 8:40. So yeah, let's if you guys have the stamina, do another half hour or so, at least working through Guillermo's stuff. Some of which, well, I don't want to bias the discussion too much, but I think, again, he was writing as he went through it with a careful comb, and I do appreciate that. And I think he thought this was a draft law that maybe hadn't seen a lawyer yet. And actually it has seen a lawyer and been passed and in a law. And so some of the stuff he was worrying or quibbling about, I think that we don't need to perhaps worry about or change, but we'll take a look at everything he had to say. So, and I may sound defensive at times because I was so integral in writing that law, and I apologize in advance for that when I say he's full of crap. But at any rate,
is Guillermo or Guy?
So Guillermo Metz gave us feedback on the law from the ag voltaic standpoint. Guy Pro went through the law, in 2021 when we first presented it, and he went through it, had his pen all over it, and so he fixed it. So all right, so now I'm going to try to share that instead. Where's my share button? There it is. There we are. All right, so again, probably hard to read, so I'm gonna have to pretty much say a lot of this, except that. All right, and at this point, Brad, I've completely hidden you. I've probably, I don't probably will see you. I can sort of see you on this computer over here. But
That's right. You're not missing
just
much.
shout out, when you want, because I'm not gonna be able to see anything. All right. Little things, he's saying that the first note he had was the Department of State is no longer the house of the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, so I will check that and fix that. Next comment. All right, so this is more philosophy. I don't know if anybody wants to go there or not. Again, the purpose of a law always motivates the law. It has some import because it sort of motivates what you're doing and why you're doing it. Again, he's definitely coming from strong ag perspective. So he's saying, you could add a part of the purpose statement about trying to strengthen the local agricultural and food system. People want to, not want to bother. What do you want to do?
I think that's a good point, because that is why we're putting so much effort into qualifying solar voltaic facilities and what the standards and guidelines are. I think it's more than
supporting important agricultural lands. It really is trying to produce agricultural production, trying to stimulate agriculture production. So I think something like that would be good to write in there.
Okay, so,
That's just me.
all right, so. Work.
I agree, Barb.
So let's see. Okay, there we go. That's what I want. I just wanted that. Okay, and I'm gonna say yes. We're gonna do this. And they're gonna do it? Okay, all right. So that's my little note to myself that we'll do that. All right. Okay. He is, again, and what he wrote to me, and he wrote, he said, these are just suggestions, don't worry too much about them, reject whatever you want, I'm not, so he's just, again, he went through with his eye. I'm not, so his comment here is that, because this refers to land temporarily fallow, in terms of what agricultural land means, because again, you can look at it and there's no ag growing there because this is the year that he grows stuff on it, that you might want to specify when it was last actively farmed. I think that's to get around the possible that's been fallow for 5 years or something. I'm not inclined to change anything. I think temporarily fallow is fair enough. I agree. All right, so this is his call. This is why the hell would you put basically solar panels over a skylight? He's entirely right, but again, this was a definition as it came from the state, and I think that you could. I mean, the point is that the skylight might happen to be there, but you really want solar panels to be there. So I'm okay leaving that in, or the sentence could end at the end of legally permitted building or structure, since what comes after is simply examples of a permitted building or structure. I'm happy to strike the last half of that, or
Yeah, I would.
I would too.
going to strike. Okay, so then at the end of the facility's lifetime, they're supposed to decommission it. There's a whole decommissioning plan, which is the last section of the law. Money set aside for such. And what we had described in decommissioning was restoring the land. I actually agree with saying to its pre-development conditions as what we mean by restoring the land. There is some issues there as to whether that is really feasible or possible. So there's a little, should you say that or not? So I open that for discussion.
I mean, talking about like fences and everything.
Right, so yeah, I mean, they're already supposed to remove all structures, and actually, I think the guidelines are removing, like they put foundations in, they have to remove down to a depth of 3 feet. So that people can farm again. I mean, I guess 4 feet was decided to be okay or something like that. I don't remember the details in the law now. I think Guy did flag some of that as, I can't remember if he made us make it easier or harder actually at the time. But at any rate, and whether that was all feasible. So
What's the problem with what makes it not feasible?
well, there are all the things so if you've gone in and put some buildings in place, like the transformer pad, et cetera, you've now mixed soil types, maybe compactors, and they're supposed to segregate soil. But you now driven heavy equipment on it, you compact it. Now you go in there with heavy equipment, take the cement out. Can you really restore it to the condition of an ag field that it was in before you drove all that heavy machinery on it, is the question, I think.
I think yes.
And so the question is, are we okay with a phrase like to its pre-development condition?
I think yes.
Is there a way to say that a little bit? Something like as close as you can get
Close as
to you to the pre.
And we should look, again, I think it's gonna be section 9. I might be more inclined to say it's restoring the land, and defining restoring the land is the part of the decommissioning plan that they have to submit. And so that section could say, restoring the land means coming as close as possible to pre-development conditions. That's a little bit much for a definition, but I think could become part of the law. So I will say add something like this to the appropriate section. And it may already say something like that. Again, Guillermo, I understand, was reading this from page 1 to page whatever, and didn't always know it was coming later. All right, for here, yeah, example, he flagged small, medium, and large. What the hell do you mean? And they said, oh yeah, I see you did define them, so I think we'll ignore that. This is another definition I have to check. There was something called the Tompkins County Scenic Resources Inventory, and he thinks the name has changed, so I will put a note to check the name. Okay, so now on the screen planting plan, he's flagging, he says, this because right now the screen planting plan describes the locations and species to be planted, and he's suggesting possibly, and this gets into something that comes down later in the screen planting plan about maintenance of the same for the duration of the project. We may need to see the latter part first before we decide on this. The section, and believe me, I don't have a memory this good, I just happened to read this afternoon. I don't remember it from 3 years ago. The screen planting plan says that an arborist has to be hired to come in like for the first couple of years to make sure things are going okay and replace things. Guillermo was suggesting that actually be for the lifetime of the project. They keep having arborists come in yearly.
That's the screen, so you can't see the solars from the road or other places.
Right.
Can't see.
Yeah.
Right.
I know.
And at the same time, he's probably suggesting that you allow slow growing things that won't block it for 20 years, because maybe apple trees would be a better choice overall. So I'm gonna say let's pause on this one until we look at that and decide what our real intent is.
I definitely see the one on Turkey Hill Road. It's got a whole bunch of dead trees. So
yeah, it's one thing for someone to say, oh yeah, we'll plant these trees in, and then but whether it should be forever or what's the reasonable duration, and maybe it's forever. There. Okay.
Or until decommission, right?
Yes, until okay. Oh, so we made again. Here's where he says, again, didn't fully read. So when we passed this law, we explicitly were only looking at electricity generation. There's a whole nother solar part that has to do with making hot water, and we didn't want the law to cover that. So he said, if you're going to include solar thermal, we'll change this, but we aren't. So we don't have to change anything. We're not going to change anything there. And the next question too, he says, are you regulating other types of solar thermal systems? No, we are not. We're only regulating ones that make electric power. Okay, this is a comment in the maybe I think here is just a misunderstanding. It says from smaller to larger class. He's flagging that, because you're not. So we have 3 classes: small, medium, large. So capitalized terms, smaller simply means you're going from medium to large or small to medium. So I think we also, there's nothing to change here. I think what he asks is, yes, it is covered if you're going to a medium size, as I read the law. Unless someone thinks we need to clarify that. All right. In this section, there's a bunch of specifications about meeting standards for a large solar facility. So these are extra burdens we're not placing on smaller facilities. And in the description of the site, he's suggesting that they also show existing soil types. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful, obviously, for understanding the farming plan, if there is one. It's extra work for someone who has no interest whatsoever in farming, but it may be still useful for them worrying about erosion or whatever, so. That's. And, I will do actual wording and then we'll look at that. All right, the next one is whether they need to indicate battery energy storage equipment and infrastructure if proposed. And this is an interesting question because we have a different law for battery energy storage. But a mixed facility wasn't fully anticipated. But when we wrote that law, I think Guy flagged that, and we may have done something in that law. But I'm okay with saying, sure, if there's other equipment. Any objections to bring something in there? And yes, this is like, the smallest ones should submit a unified solar permit. And, it will happen, but he's right, it should be shall, which is the yes, you must, as opposed to the should, which is we'd like you to, so. Okay. I'm gonna skip down to section 8, because all this stuff comes up, well, no, I should probably do it here, because this is where all this stuff is. All right, we'll deal with it here. Okay, so when the application comes in, and we may need to revisit this in general because they've changed site plan review a little bit, but I think this still works, so I'm okay with this, I think. But there's a good read through at some point, but right now, we ask for legal documents showing that they basically have the easement that's they need to proceed with the project. And it says you have to show that you have those leases for the life of the project. And the life of the project means from when you begin construction till you decommission. Aaron's wondering if we should say not the beginning of construction, but beginning of the lease period. Since there could be quite a lag between when the lease is signed and construction begins. My own view, no. All I care about is they definitely have the lease from the beginning of construction. That's just me. That maybe they even, so I don't know. But what do people think? I'm gonna take the time to read. If you can read that from there, Adam, I'm very impressed with it.
I think it looks fine.
Yes, I do.
I can read it.
Brad?
I think it looks fine. Go at the beginning of construction.
I expect, I could be wrong, that language either comes from NYSERDA or it comes from Will. That she went through this with her fine tooth comb, so. All right, so skip it out. All right. Okay. So we have a section about fencing, and again, the language in the large facility is essentially the same. And he says, okay, so again, so he says this is just fencing, but not vegetative screening, but that's because vegetative screening comes up elsewhere. So I think this is something we can ignore because we have a whole separate thing on screening. So, all right, so skip that one. Okay. First time to hit something for agrivoltaics. So, no component, so this is the height of the facility. No components shall exceed 20 feet above the finished grade when the system is oriented at maximum tilt from horizontal. Which typically means panels vertical. But they might not go vertical, so it's just as far as they can go, track the sun. I actually agree that we should probably give a waiver because the whole point is by have the raised panels higher up. If you're gonna
I
do-
agree.
Okay.
Do this.
You know, All right, let's see. Okay, so I think we've now handled this one. This comment is saying that maybe you should, mention agrivoltaics here and allow bare ground if they're doing agrivoltaics, et cetera. That's what we just went through. And I guess, so we'll plop that into here as well, section 8. So I think that we have done that. Okay, though we didn't talk about stormwater management. And so he said under stormwater management, where again, you have to have adequate vegetative cover. He said, right, maybe changes to allow for periodic short-term bare ground due to tilling. Seems reasonable to me.
I think that's already in farming stuff.
Yeah, this is a different section called stormwater management. And so it's just, it's like dotting the i's, making sure it shows everywhere that you might hit in stuff. So,
Would you just want to put in there like something similar where we did maybe IV, at the end there to say
Yeah.
that, well, this section maybe doesn't apply to agrivoltaic or maybe a farm plan or something.
Yes, I mean, I don't, whether it becomes a 0.4 or whether it becomes an addition to 0.2, let me look at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, something like that. It will just give an escape of that because I don't want to necessarily escape on point I or 0.3 necessarily. I want to read
Sure.
0.3, but it's just escape clause on the bare ground at 0.2. So
Yeah.
all right. All right. So on building mounted systems, there is a line again, which I'm sure we took straight from the sample law, that it not obscure architectural details or features. With Guillermo flagged as this is very vague, which takes me always back to our zoning. It feels like I'm in the zoning commission discussion again. I say kind of not relevant here. I don't care if it's vague. If someone wants to change this, we can, but. Okay, so we'll leave that. Okay, so regional point to discuss at least. So in construction, before they do anything, supposed to flag, obviously, things you're supposed to protect. So they shall stake or flag the boundaries of any environmentally sensitive areas in or close to the construction area. So it just says in or close with no definition of close. And Guillermo said he suggests specifying a distance. Do people want to specify a distance? If so, what do we do to decide that distance?
Does that be something like a stream? Is that what you mean? Right?
The environmentally sensitive area is defined the definitions. I no longer remember what it is. It's certainly going to mean any wetland. I don't know if we strictly mean a stream or not.
Right, but something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, are there standards for that of like, 50 feet or 100 feet in other
Well,
areas
that's
of
the
law?
research we'd have to do if we want to specify a distance, because I certainly don't know it.
Would that?
I mean, I would agree because, you would want to say, yeah, within typically what I've read in environmental conservation law is there usually is you have a buffer zone, say from a creek, of precisely this many feet from the stream. It's not just close to the stream.
All right, so if we add, are people okay with adding distance? Okay, so yeah, so then how do we determine that distance? Who wants to go out and do the legwork? Rattery has an assignment, okay, see if you can find some on that. And places you can go,
I mean, I would look at maybe New York State DEC
yeah,
website
you can see
on
there,
and on wetland protection and building within close to wetlands or close to streams, because there are like Class A protected streams. There's a stream buffer of so many feet, and I don't remember what that is off the top of my head.
the other place you go is the Hopkins County on escaping. I will try to send you, there's an environmental group, government group that should be able to help. Blanking on names right now. Okay, all right. So, okay. So, next is flagging. So in the operational requirements, we did indeed want to set some limits on noise and light, et cetera. And originally just said, they can't go above X. And I'm like, okay, fine, it does that on the day they build it, but what about later? And so we just said periodically checked, and that passed muster with our.
So Bill, real quick, in New York State, the DEC standard buffer for state regulated freshwater wetlands is 100 feet.
Okay. All right.
Just FYI.
Awesome. Thanks. So we did discuss, I think at the time we wrote the law, did you want to specify the period, but could? So that's the question is do we go through the work of saying, okay, every 3 years, every 5 years, every, it has to be redone, or leave it. I don't think the review board has a mechanism for specifying it. But we could say at a period determined by the review board, at a frequency determined by the review board, that could be a possible addition.
So this already, so when this was reviewed, the attorney guy didn't flag it as being problematic.
Right. I'm not remembering in time. So again, he had a big problem with noise stuff in general.
Yeah.
And said, how the heck are you gonna measure it? How could the town do this? They really varied it. And then I went out and I found a bunch of stuff online where you can buy this instrument to measure it, but we never reached a full resolution. And so, but I think he's bringing up, good legal questions of, is this really tenable to do? I don't remember if he had an issue with the word just periodically. But he eventually allowed us to keep the noise limit in.
Well, and there's also no recording of that, so they periodically measure it, but then they don't have to tell the code officer what they found.
Yeah,
Right?
let's see. Yeah, do we do that anywhere? That's a good point. And it may be there's more in section 8. So I remember going through that debate too.
I mean, personally, I don't think there's a reason to specify how often it has to be done if we're not also specifying that they have to tell somebody what they found.
Yeah, good point. I mean, how would you know, right?
Right.
Boy, I almost feel like there's a reporting requirement, and maybe it's only for large facilities, but we'll get that in a second, maybe.
Well, I guess the other question is who's doing the recording or who's doing the measuring?
But this puts it on the burden of the owner operator to do the measurement. And
So good manufacturing practices rely on the manufacturer to
yes, well,
police
exactly.
himself.
Well, they could be required to report it. Now then, they can lie, of course,
Right.
which would be
Sure.
a reason for the town, perhaps, if someone, basically the way we work in practice is a town person has to sort of complain saying, hey, that seems awful loud over there, and then the town might hire someone to go measure or something. But realistically, the town's not gonna send the code officer out to listen to the solar facilities every year, right? That's just not gonna happen.
Sure.
Not the way it works. So upon complaint, so they could be required to measure and report, which might mean something and might not, you know,
The periodically kind of assumes that it's on complaint, kind of.
But well, periodically says, no, they're gonna do it on some regular basis that is unspecified in the period. So I guess my suggestion would be to go with, saying that they are to measure and submit, you know, reports to the code officer, and the frequency be determined by the review board. That would be my,
And you think the review board has enough information and knowledge to be able to say, we're gonna require every 3 years for this person, but every 5 years for this person?
not them, but they are supposed to, when needed, get expert help.
Okay.
And they have a budget. I mean, you know, the operator's supposed to.
Yeah.
Find money for that sort of things. Because I agree, that would be, but
Yeah.
nor do we have the expertise to
Yeah.
specify the.
Right. Yeah. no,
Why would we not just require it every 5 years? Is there some argument against just saying, well, hey, let's just do it every 5 years?
Maybe it should be every 3 years.
Yeah.
Every 2.5 years. I mean, I know, again, I wouldn't know what interval to specify. I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't know what's reasonable.
Be drawing a number.
Yeah, I'd be drawing a number randomly.
Right.
So. Okay, there, okay. I'll come up with some words for that. Hopefully. All right, next one, it's an operator dealt with. Okay. So, last point D on under operation requirements was that, you know, equipment and vehicles not used in direct support of renovations, additions, et cetera, must not be stored or parked on the facility site. So the idea was, again, you didn't want a bunch of trucks. That becomes the parking lot, right? Guillermo is suggesting possibly allowing, you know, farming equipment to be kept there if that's what's being used on the facility. Though one,
Well, wouldn't the farming vehicles be in direct support of the
Exactly,
facility? If it's an
exactly what I'm working my
agrivoltaic?
way through. Yeah, and that was my first thought too. But maybe we needed a little more call out to. I don't know. What do people think? I'm also wondering if support would include farming.
Yeah, I mean it's direct support. I mean it's like I read this sentence as to say like you said, just we don't want a parking lot. We don't want this to be a park and ride share area. It's vehicles on official business for the facility. And now if a farm equipment is official equipment for the facility because it's an agrivoltaic facility, fine. They just don't want, you know, employees employed elsewhere parking their vehicles and I guess whatever, leaving them there.
So what was it? Do we need?
I don't think it needs to be changed.
Seems reasonable to me when it's
Okay.
worded.
All right, cool. That gets us to the end of section 7. A lot of it is going to be duplicated in section 8, but there'd be a few more new things. And I'm going to suggest we start there next meeting. I feel my alertness starting to flag when we look at stuff this carefully. It gets to be a pain in the butt. So I think we'll do that. So I'm going to stop the share here. And so we'll take up there. Next meeting is currently scheduled for, now we've been meeting Tuesdays, Aaron, but January special. And right now we have a Thursday meeting, so on Thursday, January 22nd, is that date still good for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
I don't know if this would affect it, but it has been some discussion that we might move town board meetings to a different day.
Okay, well, as long as you put them Thursday, January 22nd, that's okay. Do what you want. But yeah, I mean, if it winds up, yeah, we'll, but right now, we've got the room, and we'll all take it up with Mark. All right, and then
Take it up with.
in February, my calendar's up, okay, so, the normal-ish date might be Tuesday, if we went back to Tuesday, it'd be more like the, 20, either the 17th or the 24th, we could do either of those.
Both fine for me.
Barb, do you have a preference? Checking. And Aaron, how's your schedule?
That works.
One of those, okay. Brad, do you,
I'm not available on the 24th.
okay, so we'll do the 17th.
I don't know. The 24th will be iffy for me. I'm probably better for the 17th.
Okay, well, Barb can't do the 24th anyway, so 17th it is. So February 17th, okay, so we're on for Thursday, the 22nd, unless Mark overrides me, and then we'll do Tuesday, February 17th. And, you know, we'll see. I think we're getting there. And, I'm not sure what we're gonna take up next. There has been, as you may, all of you, I'm sure, heard a lot of concern and discussion and noise about, and little noise and figurative noise about, data centers. And I think it is likely that that's an issue we'll take up to see if Caroline wants to pass something governing, you know, the siting, location, standard, et cetera, for data centers. Okay, that seems a likely next project. We'll see.
Even though that'll probably be like a solar thing, like they got a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
One in Lansing sure is a big thing.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so I think we're done. So, thank you guys.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
One in Lansing, aren't you glad you're a part of that thing?
Yeah.